Hey friends, just a quick reminder before we get into today's episode, come join us over on our Patreon. That's where we release bonus episodes every other week, and we've already got over 20 episodes from 2023 that you can download and binge right now for as little as $3 a month. We've covered so many good books there: Haunting Adeline, Chateau, Gothicana, and so many more. That's also where we'll cover any books in a series we continue, so Serpent and Dove, High Mountain Court, Serpent and the Wings of Night. You can continue those series with us on Patreon right now. Finally, as a patron, we let you know what we're going to read every month, so you can read along with us if that's your jam. Anyway, that's all from me. On to today's episode.
Also, you're gonna believe this freakazoid creep Reika who just shows up in the middle of the forest in a cloak and is just like, she lied to you. I'm like, okay, Mother Goyle, can you dial it back 5%?
Hello, Mother Goyle. Okay, but seriously.
Welcome to Your Safe Space, the podcast your partner, friends, parents, whoever thinks is dirty. Don't have time to read books? Want to understand the jokes in the TikToks? We got you, fam. We're the Spice Traders, and we deal in spicy books. I'm Katie, and I need it to make sense.
I'm Liz, and I'm hypercritical. As always, we start every episode with 3 things. The first is a generic trigger warning. You can find specific triggers for this book in our show notes, so please check those out. Also, we do use foul language and talk a lot about sex. If you have sensitivity to any of this, please give this episode a skip.
Secondly, we talk about books. The whole book, nothing but the book, so help me goddess. If you plan to read this book and don't want something spoiled right now, don't listen to this episode.
Lastly, we acknowledge that a good book can hit you at the wrong time. The views expressed in our discussion are our opinion, and we absolutely don't want to diminish the work and the talent of the authors in our community. That said, we have some notes. So Katie, what are we talking about today?
Yeah. Today we are finally finishing The Winter King by C.L. Wilson. This is part 4 of 4, and it will cover chapters 22 through the epilogue, and it will also contain our ratings. And girl, I haven't put my ratings in yet. I still don't know what my ratings are going to be. So let's go through this together.
I don't know. I don't know. I need a new scale.
I'm sure, as it usually does, my feelings will crystallize the more we talk about it.
That's what I'm hoping, because right now it's just sort of 3s, I guess.
I know, right? Okay, so first and foremost, I do have to call out that we do have a Sarah J. Maas situation here, because there's just so much that's crammed into the last quarter of this book that it's just criminal. So buckle up. And we'll get through it together.
It is criminal.
So we last left Cam and Winter, and they were both unconscious after being attacked by Garm. So Camson wakes up first, and she realizes pretty quickly that she's chained to a bed. Valak and a bunch of other Wintermen are standing over her, and they don't look very happy. So she demands to know what's up. Yeah, unfortunately not kinky, though.
I know.
Not that kind of book.
Not at all. What a bummer.
So she demands to know what's up, and Valak's like, what were you doing outside of the palace during the hunt? And she's like, that's a very specific question. I'm your queen, and I've already explained myself to my husband, your king, so you can ask him. And then Valak's like, well, your brother invaded Wintercraig 3 days ago, and Verdon and his generals also escaped their confinement that day, too, and so the timing of you leaving the palace is kind of suspicious. So Cam's like, oof, fair.
Yeah, because that is really suspicious. But also, I don't remember her dad and the generals being put into confinement. Valak kind of says it as if they escaped prison, but I thought they were just left to be in Summerley.
I think they were, but I think they were probably not in prison, but kind of on house arrest, like when you're a suspect in a crime, don't leave the city kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because I was like, they escaped their confinement. What are you talking about, bro?
Well, because they also, Winter wouldn't want them unsupervised, because then they might, I don't know, start to try try to start a rebellion, you know?
Yeah, that's true. So like they're definitely under watch, but they did anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, good on ya.
Way
I
to
guess.
go. Right?
So where were we? So Cam tells them everything, right? Reka sneaking out of the palace, all of that. I mean, I guess she didn't really sneak, but you know, the Reka part in particular, and then the Garm. But some of the Wintermen around her don't believe her. It's clear that they had no idea about the number of Garm who attacked her in Winter, which tells Cam that Winter is either dead or still unconscious. So Valak confirms for her that Winter has not woken up, he's unconscious.
And near death?
She demands at that point to be taken to Winter and is met with swads. And so she's like, let me see him or I'll fry you all where you stand. Which is like great badass energy. But I think the problem that I have with Cam is that it just feels like so inconsistent.
Yeah, because I liked this scene, and she kind of stands up to Valak and is like, I'm your queen. Like, and she already saw a glimmer of like, oh, maybe she's not lying in Valak. And so this like, I will gather my power and I will kill you. But it's not consistent because so many other times she's just like a wallflower.
Yeah, or she's insecure in being able to wield her powers. Like, we'll see even like, I don't know, 20 pages away from this where she's basically given an opportunity to use her power at will, and she's like trying to figure out how to do it. And I'm like, okay, so then how are you gonna make good on threats like that?
I know, and I this is me totally giving her the benefit of the doubt, like thinking that maybe she could just bluff them all, like they don't know how inconsistent it is, but girl, we do. Who are you kidding?
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me of this particular thing reminded me a lot of like in part 1 where she was like, no man's gonna put me out onto a glacier, and then like the very next chapter she's dying. Like, girl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like good thought, poor execution.
Very poor execution. But regardless, Valak takes her to Winter, and when she sees him, she's horrified to see that they've actually put him in the fireplace that is fully on fire. And the reason that they've done that, Galicia tells her, is that it's the only way to keep the Ice Heart at bay. Because Winter is very close to turning into the Ice King. And when Cam looks more closely at him, she sees that his entire body is covered with ice.
Yeah, the fire's not touching him at all, which was a really fascinating visual. I just wish I understood more of this whole Ice King thing, because I do think that the details are well executed, just not the crux of it.
Yeah, I just have questions. And they're like, it's like you're weaving a carpet and you want to make it square, but it kind of turns out like a rhombus. And I just want to make it straight.
That is a really good way to phrase that.
So now that Cam is awake, they all want her to try to push the Ice Heart back permanently using her weather gifts. The reason that they think she can do this is because Valak in particular has seen that she's done that before in the past. But I don't think that's the way that, like, I just have questions about this. Like, Valak doesn't like Cam, but now all of a sudden he's like, she's the only one that can push. Like, I just don't buy that.
No, and point to me when she did that before. Show me proof of that.
In his presence, I would say never.
So, like, what is he even talking about?
Exactly. But nevertheless, they all go outside, and Cam summons a storm and strikes herself with lightning so her body heats up, like, a lot, and then she hugs Winter to melt the ice his body is encased in. So this is the scene that I'm talking about, where they're standing outside this hunting lodge that Winter's family has, and she's like, okay, how do I summon a storm when I'm not in danger and I'm not angry? I'm like, girl, you're 20-something. How have you not figured this out? Like, I just... Okay. And then she like she ends up doing it because she talks herself up about how Winter's the only man that ever vouched for her, blah, 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 blah. I just didn't like this.
I didn't like that either. And I think I had this complaint in either the first or the second part of you weren't recognized as a member of your own court or your own family. How have you not learned how to work on your gifts? And even this whole like, Winter's the only one who's ever seen me. Like, I don't think that's true either, because you haven't spent any time together.
No. Well, and maybe toward the end there, he was starting to make her feel welcome, but that's certainly not the majority of his actions. And so I don't think it's fair for her to just be like, all sins are forgiven, you know?
Yeah, no, because it's stupid.
Yeah. But regardless, this strategy works, and Winter wakes up and is relieved to see Cam alive. But he's still weak because he still has wounds and he's lost a lot of blood. So the ice has essentially prevented anybody from treating the wounds that he sustained when they were fighting off the Garm. So they kind of confer about what to do about that, and Cam ultimately says that they need Tildy as she's the best healer that she knows about. And it turns out that Winter had already sent for Tildy before, specifically somewhere between the time that Mel suggested that Cam needed a friend and before or around the time that he realized that Cam is pregnant again. So Tildy is super close. Also, surprise, Cam, you're pregnant.
I hated this reveal so much. I hated it. Because then it was like, oh, and Winter already knew. Also, like, and I think I just don't like pregnancy as a trope. And I know that was kind of the whole point in here. But, like, how can she... Okay. She knows still at this point that the only way to save her own life is to have a kid, essentially, right? How is she not aware of her own periods?
Yeah, I think that's the thing about the pregnancy tropes that I hate the most. It's like, how did you grow up and nobody told you about these things? Like, I'll be the first to admit that I, during my pregnancy, had no idea what I was doing. But I was at least aware of the things that would happen to me when I was pregnant. And even if I had blown right past, like, taking a test and, like, actually trying to track it and make it happen, like, I was so ill that first semester that, like, or the first trimester, I should say, that there's no way that I would mistake that for anything else.
Well, she really, I mean, so we see her as the audience, like, sick and dizzy and ill, but she really doesn't give it any thoughts. Like, we never get an internal monologue of her being like, this is weird, I was never sick like this before. Like, she doesn't question it. She just exists in illness.
Right, exactly. And I'm like, okay, so have you always been this delicate of a constitution? Also, Tildy, like, Tildy shows up, spoilers, and she's like, I had hoped to find you pregnant. I'm like, Tildy, did you not prepare her to know, like, what pregnancy would feel like? Come on.
Okay, right? And then even, like, because she's like, I'm not pregnant. And Mel is like, well, when's the last time you bled? And she thinks about it. She's like, oh, it's been 6 weeks. And I'm just like, you were 20-something years old.
Girl.
I can understand not knowing the first time, right? She has a miscarriage pretty quick. But, like, what the fuck? I think it's Mel who says it. And she's like, well, you guys, essentially, she doesn't use these words, but you guys have basically been, like, fucking like rabbits. So
if you weren't pregnant, something would be wrong.
Right. Like, one of you has a problem. But I don't like the pregnancy trope, which I think many reasons why I was mad that she got pregnant anyway. But I was like, this reveal was such bullshit.
It was bullshit even, okay. Yeah, we'll get to it when we get to it, but it was bullshit because it didn't fulfill the success criteria that this book has laid out, right? And the success criteria, I mean, like, what it's going to take for both of them to, like, shut up and admit that you trust and love each other. It's not the baby. So the baby's almost like secondary. It is secondary to, like, what it actually takes, which is annoying because then why are we here?
Right, because then why make her pregnant at all? Like, I was gonna say it's not that much more interesting, but I think it's a more interesting story if she had been able to thaw the ice heart and save him just from his love of her, which is what we had thought.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is kind of true, but they still get a baby.
Yeah, consolation prize, I guess.
As all babies should be.
There's also this weird thing because Calicia's like, oh yeah, Winter noticed that you started smelling differently. And that's when he knew that you were pregnant. So you'll give birth at the end of the summer. Ew. I know that
gross.
That he's like a wolf, something. I don't care. That's disgusting.
No, you don't have to tell me that. I don't need to know that.
No.
And it bothers me that, like, because that's gross, for one. But it also bothers me that he was just like waiting for her to realize it, which makes all the scenes they've had together even weirder.
Yeah. Anyway, so Valak leaves to go get Tildy, and after 3 days, they come back to the hunting lodge. Cam is very happy to see Tildy, but Valak is wary for a lot of reasons. And then also Cam does this weird thing where she introduces Tildy to Valak, and I'm like, girl, they just traveled like 3 days together. Why are you introducing them?
And I was also a little confused why she's like suddenly super happy to see Tildy when the last time they saw each other, she was basically like, I never want to see your face again. Goodbye.
That was very non sequitur.
Yeah, now she's just like, oh, Tildy, my favorite.
Like, my only friend. Girl, still staff.
Still staff.
Anyway, it comes out that Valak is the one that Tildy was passing information to back in the day. So they're like old pals, right? Been there, done that. So Tildy sets to work, even though Valak doesn't trust her. And as she does so, Cam shares with her about the miscarriage thing with Bella, Verdon, and Tildy is again shocked by Verdon's actions, to which I say, why are we still here?
To which I say, what?
Yeah. But she works until the infection in Winter's wounds has gotten under control, and that's when Cam and Tildy and Galacia finally take a break. Valak's like, go rest, you did your part, thank you so much, we'll take it from here. So they rest, and Cam is woken up by Tildy, who tries to convince her to run away to her freedom. She tells her that she drugged the guards so no one will stop them, and goes on to say that her brother Falcon is waiting for Cam. But Cam refuses. She tells Tildy that she'll keep Tildy there against her will if that's what it takes to ensure Winter's recovery. So she tells Tildy to send Falcon a message that they aren't coming.
Okay.
So though Winter is recovering, Valak gets word that they must move. He takes Cam outside with Galacia and asks her about her loyalties. She tells him, quote, "This is my home now, more of a home than Summerlee ever was. Is that what you wanted to hear? That my life there was so pathetic, my existence so miserable that I am happier here, even living under constant clouds of suspicion and doubt than I ever was there," end quote. But he presses her, if you had a choice between your family and Winter, who would you pick? And she's like, I would choose Winter because I love him. So, having been convinced of her loyalty finally, I guess, they tell her that Verisola has been freed and that Guildheim is defenseless against the armies because I guess the armies are spread along the coast. Like, this is where I just didn't understand why Guildheim was so ill-equipped to defend against an invasion since they were the victor in that war.
And we've seen, the whole time that Winter was avoiding her, he was like going to outposts and plotting and protecting. So like, how was it just like Guildheim has fallen? Like, how?
Yeah. Well, and like Winter made this whole like show of telling us before that like the coasts were vulnerable because their like watch posts were crumbling and not well manned. And I'm like, okay, then like, where is everybody? Like, I just don't. You marched back with an army from Verisola at the beginning of this book. Like, where did all those people go?
Are they just on vacay?
I guess. Like, it's clear that this book was trying to like be political. I just don't think it was executed very well.
No, it's honestly, so I do like political intrigue in books. Like I'm listening to one now that is doing a pretty good job of it. When we have more time, I got to tell you about the magic system because it's really cool. But don't write a political book if you don't want to do the research or the planning to make it make sense.
Right. Or at least bounce some ideas off of somebody, right? First. And I'm not saying I'm sure this author did that, but it's just like, this seems like a pretty glaring question. And I would be even okay with like a one-line fixer of like, oh yeah, even though we won, like we're down to a third of our capacity or whatever it was, but we don't get that.
Yeah. Which just bugs me.
Yeah. So Valak and Galacia tell Cam that she has to ride back to the capital in order to help protect it. And that specifically she must find Blazing because Galacia actually knows where it is and has this whole time. It's in the temple of Wyrn, which is the goddess that Galacia serves.
Wyrn.
So back to Winter, who finally wakes up when he isn't supposed to, and he struggles as Tildy has his men hold him down so she can drug him again. Essentially, they don't want him up and moving around because his wounds are still healing, and so they want him asleep. During this time, his internal monologue searches for Cam and wonders why she's left him. Back to Cam.
Well.
She's passing through the village of Conundal and finds it deserted. Its inhabitants have been slaughtered by the Garm. When they arrive at the Palace of Gildenheim, they have a similar scene to behold, but not everyone is dead. The survivors are kind of cleaning up the place, and Lady Mel is one of them. She tells them that they were beset by 5 Garm and that those they killed with their breath came back to life as their thralls. This is taken as evidence that Rorschach, the Ice King, has indeed returned. So with renewed urgency, Cam hurries to the Temple of Wyrn, and they find that too deserted. She arrives with a handful of guards, and she leaves those guards in the main room, knowing that she must continue to where Blazing is alone, and also naked for some reason. Okay.
Girl, what?
Yeah, right. So
I read that a couple times. Like, why?
And like she does this one-line fixer. She's like, ceremonial saunas and cold plunges, blah, blah. I don't do any of that. I just have to go naked. I'm like, okay, but I didn't see evidence of magic that would kill you if you weren't naked. And then you put on a ceremonial robe anyway, so you're not really like, why?
It just doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make sense.
So she puts on a robe, right? And she also has one of the crystal spears from Galatia in case she needs it. As she regresses down a hall through a gilded door, she finds one of the priestesses that has been slain. She continues on another long tunnel, and that eventually leads to a room with heavier robes and boots, and she changes into those. And I'm like, why are there so many costume changes here? I don't know.
It's a great
And then
question.
that tunnel leads very, very far down under a glacier. At the bottom of this tunnel, she finds a palace that is like the palace of the goddess Wyrn, apparently. And it's in a cavern so large that it could fit all of Gildenheim with room to spare. And I have a lot of questions, like, what and for why? And like, okay, so this temple was built into the side of a mountain glacier, and then this tunnel was built from the temple to this palace that was there, and maybe it was used by somebody at some point, and so was it covered by the glacier after the fact? Like, why is this here?
That's, a wonderful series of questions, and I couldn't tell you.
So she goes into the palace and finds its innermost room, and at the door she finds the other priestess, also slain. Inside this room is a rotunda with life-size statues of men and women around it, which are all frozen in a different pose, like they were trying to do something, like all trying to do different things, like running or fighting or whatever. In the center of the room is a pool of black liquid. Cam knows that she must go into this pool to get Blazing, and it's here that she realizes that the gods are actually very real, which is something that she had never considered before, and that must include the tales about Roland. And I'm just like, okay.
Okay. This doesn't make any sense to me because she is obsessed with Roland and is from his line, right? Like Roland is supposedly her like great uncle or some shit, but you didn't think he was real?
Yeah, I just
What?
I just have a lot of questions here because like the Roland thing, it's weird that Roland is lumped in with like the gods and goddesses part. Like you're supposed to be related to Roland, like even to the point where you talked about how like it was actually his brother because Roland died, and I'm like, that seemed like a history lesson, not a legend, right? And maybe there are things about that have been like exaggerated over time, like King Arthur-esque, but
Right.
I don't understand why she lumps him into the same like thought as like, oh, the goddess of Wyrn is actually like a thing. Okay. What? Okay.
It just felt like such a weird. I didn't need any of that, and it just gave me more confusion, and it upset me.
Yeah, it's also weird to me that like it's never explicitly said, but it's almost like Blazing should be intertwined with like this story of the Ice King and this goddess of Wyrn, but it's not. Like they have the ice spears, and then like blazing is this other thing that like maybe we got some information on where it came from, but I don't remember what it was, and it just feels like very all over the place.
I feel the same way, and I think that would have been so clean because it makes sense for them. This kind of strikes me as if she had a plan for it to be tied together and just didn't execute it, because it makes sense for there to be blazing, a sword that just by the name is associated with heat and fire, to me, to be counter to the ice swords, which are the only things that can kill the Ice King, like, and Roland. Like, all the pieces are there, they just weren't connected.
Yeah, I agree. Because it's like, why does an ice spear kill an ice king? Why wouldn't a fire sword kill an ice king, right? Like, why wouldn't blazing be something that the goddess of Wyrn created to kill her corrupted lover, right?
Yeah, which would be so much more streamlined and frankly interesting than this weird, like, I'm just going to shove all these stories together and hope it sticks.
Agreed. Anyway, so Cam is standing there contemplating what she has to do, and then she's attacked. When she faces her attacker, it's a woman with white hair and blue-white skin with pale, colorless eyes. And she realizes pretty quickly that it's one of the statues that is actually an ice thrall. She knows in her head, and she's said kind of to us in her inner monologue, like, don't touch anything, because if she touches something, like, that will trigger kind of the traps in the room to, like, spring, and maybe one of those traps is these statues coming alive. And so she's, like, looking at this thing attacking her. She's like, I didn't touch anything. Why is this happening? But she doesn't really have an opportunity to think much past that, because she realizes that her attacker also has one of the ice spears. So she's like grappling with this being, and she loses her footing and falls backward into the pool. It's freezing cold, and she feels like she's being dragged down to the bottom and frozen to her very core. Once inside, she realizes that the top has frozen over as well, so she has to find an air pocket and suck down as much air as she possibly can before she dives down for blazing. Just as she's about to lose all of her breath, she sees the sword and grasps it. As soon as her hand reaches the hilt, she sees like a vision of the past. Specifically, she sees the god Helos falling in love with a mortal queen and siring Roland and his brother. She sees Roland grow up. She sees him wedding a winter princess. She sees foreign kings threatened by that union and invading Wintercraig. And then she sees Roland using the sword blazing and using it to vanquish the invaders and supposedly end his life. But in her vision, she realizes that Roland did not die before siring a child because his queen was already pregnant. And thus Cam realizes that she is indeed descended from Roland himself and not his brother. This poor brother is just like playing second fiddle all over the place.
I know, because like, I don't know. He doesn't even really get named, does he? He doesn't even get named.
I want to, I don't know. I don't remember. I would be speaking out of my ass to say yes, definitively.
Like, it doesn't really matter that he doesn't, but like, just his poor brother. And then there's this reveal of like, oh, you're descended from Roland specifically. Like, this is, I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm like, does it matter? Okay.
No, it doesn't. No.
So this kind of vision quest happens over the course of an instant, and when she comes back to herself, Cam realizes that she has renewed vigor and air in her lungs, and she uses that energy as well as the sword to break through the ice on the surface of the pool. Once back in the room, she fights off the thrall who attacked her and plunges the sword into its heart. When she does, it becomes clear that this person was Elka. As she's dying, she tells Cam who pushed her into this room to try to get the ice heart, and it was Reka. It was also Reka who raised Rorschach from the dead. And then Elka dies and Cam realizes that she's wearing Falcon's pendant, so she takes that from her. So it's clear here that Reka has also taken the ice heart, and Elka says very specifically, like, Reka has raised Rorschach from the dead. Does that mean she's embodying Rorschach? Is Rorschach a separate person? Like, we'll see later in this battle for no reason that the Ice King is kind of embodied in Winter, but like, I'm just confused.
I read this part probably like 3 times trying to understand what happened. And I still don't understand how many ice hearts there are and why people can just go take it like willy-nilly, and why no one knew that she took it if it's like guarded and there's a test to take it. And if she has it, then how can Winter also have it? And if Rorschach has been raised, and why is Winter in any danger of the Ice King at all personally? Can there just be like infinite Rorschachs? Like, I don't, why are there multiples? Why are there multiples?
Right. All of these are good questions.
Like, it really lost me in this part. So I was like, none of this makes sense. None of this makes sense to me.
No, same. So
I was hoping you would explain it to me, but I feel better now knowing that I didn't miss anything.
Girl, I wish I could, but I can't, so I won't. So Cam,
I can't, so I won't.
Cam is also reeling from this information, but for completely different reasons, because to her it all makes sense. She's like, bah. And one of the things that she realizes, and this is another thing that throws a wrench into my thought process, is that if Rika is the one who has summoned the Ice King or resurrected him or whatever, then there's still a chance to save Winter. Ergo, Winter is not the Ice King. And I'm like, girl, which is it?
Because if Winter's not the Ice King, then what the hell is happening to Winter?
Well, and we'll see in just like a couple of pages, he is the Ice King. Like, I just, I don't get it.
So again, my question, can there just be infinite Ice Kings? How many people can do this thing? And why do you let anyone do it?
Right. And if there's more than like 5 Ice Kings, doesn't that become like an oligarchy or a democracy at some point? And then like, who do the frost giants obey? Is it just like a favoritism thing, or do they cast votes? Like, I have questions.
I have so many questions.
So Cam is contemplating her next move. She does that a lot. And in this pause, Elka rises from the dead. So Cam uses Blazing's magic and speaks aloud the command burn and sets fire to Elka. And this is something that I just absolutely could not stand about the way this sword works, is that she holds it in her hand. She like, I picture holds it upright, right? So hilt in the hand, blade sword pointing skyward. And she's like pointing it at the person perpendicular to the ground, and she just says burn, and then the thing burns, and I'm just like, wow, that is dorky as hell.
That's what I pictured, and honestly it fell in line with all of her pretend play with it.
Yeah.
And I hated it. I hated it.
Oh yeah So back to Winter, who's having a dream about wolves gathering, and just before he wakes up he realizes that the wolves are not wolves but Garm. When he wakes up, he confers with the people around him, specifically Tilde and Valak. He asks what happened, and they're like, well, you've been out for a week, and you were healing. And he's like, cool. So Cam did indeed protect me and killed 2 Garm that were attacking us.
That's really what happened.
Yeah. But he's like, so where's she at? And Valak's like, well, she's defending your palace. And he's like, cool, but I want her here with me.
But I'm lonely.
Yeah. He tells us that he feels a coldness within him when she's not by his side. And I'm like, God.
Gross.
He then tells them that they need to get moving because the Ice King's army has formed and that they are specifically coming directly for them, which I guess is essentially the information that he got from his dream. But that's kind of a wild thing to do, to make a decision like that based on a dream.
Especially when we haven't gotten any information that he's particularly prophetic or that the wolves like communicate with him. Mm-hmm. So like, my man, what? And no one questions it. They're just like, yes, sir. Let's go do it, sir.
Right. They're like, nobody asks a follow-up question like, how do you know that? Who told you?
Nope. Because I said so. They're like, okay.
Yep. But ultimately, they all end up bargaining on how long they're going to stay and wait, because Winter is still not really well enough to travel. So they agree that they will wait 2 days and then travel, which is information I did not need to see.
No. Tell me that later.
Right. Back to Cam, who is exiting the temple. She finds Christy. He is there with the guards that she left behind. And they're like, cool, you got the thing? Let's go protect our people. But as they leave the temple, they're ambushed by Falcon, who kills all of the guards except for Christy and Cam. Falcon tells her that he got her message, but there was no way he wasn't going to come and save his sister, who he loves. Cam tells us, quote, he spoke with such absolute sincerity that Cam's heart stuttered for an instant. She truly believed he'd come for her because he loved her and had to save her. She wanted to believe him, just as she wanted to believe the best of him all her life, but she didn't. So with this sentiment, she pretty quickly realizes that Falcon is very self-serving and really was only there for whomever left the temple with the sword. And once the gloves are off, he demands the sword from Cam, but she refuses. And again, Cam proves how useless she is because she allows herself to be hit on the head by some other guard and blacks out.
She's so dumb.
The scream I screamed, the eyes I rolled when I read this, I almost yeeted my phone across the room. I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. This is so dumb. Like, Cam, I want to root for you, but girl, you're not giving me very much.
No, I was reading at the top of my lungs because I was like a little bit behind. But at this part, I did have a good 20 seconds of staring into the abyss of being like, I can't finish this book. I can't finish this book. I'm just going to tell Katie that I can't finish this book.
Girl, I had the same thought. I read that. I was like, I'm out. And I don't think I picked this book back up for like a couple of days.
No, the only reason I kept going is because this was like yesterday and I was like, God, fucking damn it. And thank God there were like 50 pages left, but I was like, I can't.
Yeah. So when Cam wakes up, she's tied up and they're like camping somewhere.
Of course.
And Cam asks Falcon what he's going to do with the sword, and he says that he's going to get revenge on the Winter people. And she's like, well, that doesn't sound very noble. And he's like, don't worry about that. Kings need to be feared. Nobility is a fine ideal, but real life demands something a little bit more practical. She's like, that's the answer of a weak man and not a strong king.
Falcon definitely voted for Trump.
He definitely voted for Trump. And I think one of the things that was so frustrating to me about the end of this book was that Cam continually tries to engage with her brother, even though he gives her no indication that that's going to be a fruitful exercise. So she continues this conversation, trying to find some shred of humanity in him. So she tells him about Elka's fate. At first, Falcon doesn't believe her because he's already swallowed the narrative that Elka betrayed him. But she gives him the emblem that she took from Elka's neck, and all he can say about that after that is that he was wrong about the fact that she betrayed him. Cool.
He's got no feelings. But also, like, that wasn't satisfying to me either. At this point, I didn't really care, but I wanted more of a story of Falcon and Elka. Like, how did you find each other? Tell me all of that. What happened there?
Yeah, Falcon just doesn't seem like a very full-formed character to me because I really don't understand his motivations because it seems like he's drinking his dad's Kool-Aid because his dad is like, well, the Winter Court has like always been mean to us and so we should do something about that. But that feels very much like I just don't like you. And just from who Falcon was told to us to be when like at the beginning of this book, I just don't know how he went so far down the path of corruption.
Exactly. Like, especially because we don't see anything that happens when he comes to visit the first time as like an emissary. And I just feel like that's a kind of a gaping hole.
Yeah. So when the Elka thing doesn't work, Cam tries to tell him about the apocalypse that will come with the Ice King, but he tells her that those are just children's stories and that she's being a stupid woman.
Cool.
And it's here that he reveals that he was complicit in luring the Garm to villagers as a distraction. And Cam is horrified, but Falcon is done with the conversation. And so he tells Cam not to do anything stupid because he's holding Christy hostage. Cool.
Also, until this part, I kind of forgot about Christy entirely.
Yeah, you'd be forgiven because Cam does too in a big way.
As we have decided.
Yeah. So the next day they move on and we learn that Falcon's traveling with about 24 soldiers. Cam gets on her own horse but is threatened to stay in line with the Christie thing. So as they travel, she tries to leave a trail of threads from her clothes, hoping that at least Winter's wolves might be able to track her scent. When they stop for the day, she asks about the original distraction when Falcon and Elka ran away. Falcon tells her that it wasn't his intention for the pillaging and raping to happen, but he reveals that he sent one of his men, actually one of his friends, to cause this distraction and that it was up to their discretion on how to do it. But Cam is like, dude, you know exactly the character of that person that you sent. Like, you knew what was going to happen. She says specifically, quote, in other words, you let the dogs out without caring who got hurt or how badly. And that's a pattern that she's starting to recognize in her brother.
Which I was relieved that she came full circle on him pretty quickly. You're right, she continues to try and engage with him for too long. But I'm glad that she, like, sees him for who he is and doesn't stay a Falcon defender until the end.
Yeah, same. I don't understand why she keeps engaging. Like, the first realization that he, like, never actually cared for her, just, like, it was all surface level, like, I would have been out. And frankly, I didn't need this additional, like, character development of Falcon because it just serves to illustrate how one note and shitty he is.
Exactly. And I also think I would have liked a recognition of, like, oh shit, Winter was telling the truth the whole time, which we kind of get, but, like, it's not satisfying.
No, not at all. So we're still talking with Falcon, and they go on to have a conversation about how Falcon caused all of this struggle and then ran, and that's not a very noble, kingly thing to do. And Falcon's like, okay, fine, but is your husband any different? And Cam's like, yeah, because he didn't start the fight.
Right. He just finished it.
Right. He just finished it. Oof. She goads Falcon so much that he stands up and jabs Blazing in her direction. And it's like he's intending to use the magic to, like, hurt her. But the sword sort of doesn't respond, and he tries to play it off like he's, like, in control of his anger. And at first, Cam takes it at face value.
But,
So back at the ranch with Winter, they're still at this fucking hunting lodge.
Oh my god, it takes so long.
I know. He accuses Galacia of sending his pregnant wife on a death mission. He also adds that she could betray them all by getting Blazing. But Tildy interjects and is like, Cam wouldn't do that because I gave her the chance to do just that, and she refused.
Tildy.
So they talk more about the Ice King's forces, and then they eventually decide that they're going to try to lead those forces to the invading army with Falcon and try to have, like, both of those sides fight each other and potentially in the process, like, save Gildenheim and also figure out a way to, like, free Cam. Because the assumption here, I guess, is that Cam is in danger. I don't know where they got that idea.
I don't know. I guess that she's not trying to betray you, but she's also still with the enemy, so therefore she must be in danger because she is a wilting flower.
Yeah, and she can't take care of herself. I get that.
Yeah.
Back to Cam, who, after replaying the scene with the sword and her brother, realizes exactly what happened and that her brother actually can't control the sword. When they make camp, she and Christy are left alone to eat, and they try to break out of their confinement. But just before they do, Falcon rides up and accuses Cam of giving him a fake sword. And she's like, bro, it's not fake. You're just not Roland's heir. Sucks to suck.
Sounds like a you problem.
And she's like, you know who has two thumbs and is Roland's heir? This bitch.
I'm going to make that a meme.
So when she announces this, her father of all people appears and is like, yeah, you're his heir over my dead body. I'm just
okay,
like, this
bro.
guy.
Get out of here.
So they have a touching family reunion where Verdon and Falcon argue over how the hell Cam is the heir of Roland, and neither one of them are. All the while, Cam is tied up and gagged in the corner.
What a lovely reunion. Sounds like all the other family moments they've had.
Truly. So Falcon's so worked up that he goes to strike Cam. I think because she said something, but she's not gagged at this point, I guess. Somebody took her gag off. And so she says something to Falcon, and that pisses him off. And he goes to, like, slap her. And she's like, oh, yeah, hit a woman who's defenseless and tied up. What a big, strong king you are. Oh. And so he doesn't hit her.
But also he learned from his daddy. So
he learned from his daddy. Yeah. Oof. Speaking of daddy, Verdon again tells Cam how much he doesn't love her and how much he blames her for her mother's death. Like, God damn it, dude, leave it alone.
Go to therapy about it. Okay, move on.
Yeah, and Cam is basically like, tell somebody who cares, right? Because it wasn't my fault. You stuck your dick in her just as much as she let you do that. So, like, this is just a weak excuse that you've been using your entire life. So miss me with that. Thank you.
Yes, finally.
And this causes him to punch her in the mouth, and that knocks her into the dirt.
Yeah.
I should mention at this point that they've, like, essentially put a lead cape on her so she can't use her weather gifts. Remember how like she would go underground to like
Oh yeah.
break her
Can't, like-
connection? I think it's the same principle.
That makes sense. It doesn't, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I guess. So then Verdon and Falcon hypothesize that maybe if Cam dies, the sword will recognize one of them as its heir instead. But before
Wow.
they can make good on that threat, they hear the screams of their men outside. When Verdon pokes his head out of the tent, it's clear that the Garm are attacking. So Falcon shouts to arms and Cam begs to be released to help. Her father releases her binds, but then immediately pushes her outside into the path of a Garm so that he doesn't have to kill her himself, but he can still potentially get, the heir thing sorted.
I don't know why he doesn't just kill her. Like, it doesn't make sense to me why he isn't just like, here's the sword, I'm gonna cut your throat.
I don't either. I think it's because he's a little bitch, but that's not super clear.
No, he's a little bitch baby.
Little bitch boy. So Cam, as she's being like wheeled backwards and falling outside, she does grab onto her father and he like falls outside on top of her. And the Garm outside, this is so anticlimactic. The Garm attacks and kills her father in the space of like a paragraph.
Yeah, it was so anticlimactic, and there was no justice.
No, I really wanted Cam to like disembowel her father.
Yeah, or at least like intentionally throw him in front of a Garm. Like this was just
Right.
accidental.
Totally. Or have Winter like do something. I don't know. It just
smite him.
it felt like
lightning.
it felt like it took the power away from Cam in this situation.
TTTWOOMS.
Yeah, totally. So her father dies and like falls on top of Cam, pinning her to the ground. And so she like
Classic.
looks over at the tent and asks Falcon for help, but instead of helping her, he ducks back into the tent, leaving her alone.
Coward.
Yeah. The Garm that killed her father then makes its intention known to kill Cam. And so she uses what little bit of like weather gifts she can muster under this lead coat to like just shock it with lightning. But that doesn't like do anything. It just makes it mad.
Classic.
But before it can like make the killing strike, Christy shows up and kills it with a spear.
Nice,
He
Christy.
then, yeah, go Christy. He then frees Cam and she tries to make him run or at least hide, but he's like, dude, the safest place for me right now is next to you because you have blazing back.
This thing I never heard about till a month ago.
Right. So they go through the camp and they fight the Garm alongside the Calburnans and other Summerlanders. So the Calburnans, remember, are essentially the mercenary army that Falcon hired to help him retake Wintercraig.
But we don't know where that is because we don't have a map.
Right. So at some point in the fray, she does find Falcon again, and he's finally fighting, but he decides that he doesn't look like he needs any help, and they leave him alone. At the end of the battle, instead of leaving, Cam realizes that she actually needs to convince her brother's forces to join Winter's men to fight off the rest of the Ice King if they have a chance at winning. So when she goes to her brother, Falcon tries to intimidate Cam again into giving him the sword by targeting Christy. But she says, look, if you kill Christy, then I'll just level this entire camp and we can be done with it. So he tries to
choose.
call her bluff and orders the archers to fire, but she uses the sword to muster a shield, and that shield turns into a wall of fire that she pushes outward toward the people who fired at her. And she tells her brother, quote, I meant to offer you a chance to make amends, to recover some part of honor that you threw away. But if death is your choice, then death it will be.
Which I did like that line. But it also
Definitely.
just felt... But this should have been with her dad more so than Falcon, I think.
Yeah, because Falcon wasn't the one that beat her to almost half to death to make her marry Winter, right? Like,
Right. He wasn't
Like
there for any of that.
Falcon's a sniveling brat, but like, I don't know. It just,
But he's not the problem.
no. I mean, he is a problem,
No,
but he's not
He's not the
biggest
main problem. Exactly.
I also, like, this is a good example of, like, how badass Cam can be, and I want to root for that side, but it's just tough because it's so inconsistent. Like, this is one example where she's, like, in charge of herself, but before, where she was, like, she met her brother and then she got knocked out. I'm like, what? You weren't prepared? Okay. You weren't watching your
Exactly.
back? Like, nothing? Okay.
The inconsistency is really a problem.
Yeah. So after she says that, the leader of the mercenaries laughs and says that he likes her. And so she's like, okay, cool, I can work with this. And she starts to negotiate with him. They end up agreeing that his army will join her in exchange for the opportunity for his men to court winter and summer ladies, since their society is in great need of women. They also promise goods in exchange for this service as well. With that settled, she turns back to her brother and offers him the chance to fight for her or die, and he chooses to fight for her. She then offers the same to the remaining Summermen, and it's unclear how many of those join her or how many of them she slaughters in cold blood. I just made
don't
up
know why
that
she
last
would
part.
trust him. No, but that's the preference, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know why she would trust him either.
That's stupid.
So back with Winter, who is restless in his tent as they travel. To get his mind off of whether or not Cam is true to him, he goes for a walk in the woods alone. He finds Reka, who tells him that Cam has betrayed him. At first, Winter doesn't believe her, so she tells him to ask the wolves, and as he does, we switch back to Cam, only to see that they've broken camp and she and her brother are riding side by side, having an absolutely inane conversation. Brother, show me that through the wolves' vision.
I don't need to see any of that.
I certainly don't want to hear what the fuck they're talking about. Like,
nope. I don't give two shits.
Because we go immediately back to Winter, and that illustrates exactly what the wolves tell Winter is happening. And this strikes Winter very hard because it, on surface level, looks like Cam has betrayed Falcon because he doesn't have any of the context about what the fuck just happened. So he's like grieving, and Reka encourages him to embrace the Ice Heart in order to punish her. Winter can't think straight, and he finds himself frozen inside and out. And at that point, Reka welcomes him as the Ice King.
Okay.
And this is the part where I'm just like, not a follow-up. Like, Reka is such a blind spot for him, and we never really resolve that because, like, she just shows up out of nowhere. And he knows that Cam told him that she's the one that attacked Cam. So, like, why is he listening to her at all?
Why not kill her on sight?
I would have, like, come on.
Yeah.
It's just so annoying. Like, he's not using his frontal cortex very well.
Not at all. And the blind spot for her doesn't make any sense. Like, if you had convinced me that he owed her some loyalty or they, like, I mean, I know that they're friends, but, like, give me more than that. Like, did she save his life in Nam? Like, what is happening?
Saved his life in Nam. Okay. So back to Cam, and they've come upon some kind of valley that lets them see the entirety of the Ice King's army. And it's huge. It includes frozen ice thralls of humans, wolves, and bears, as well as Garm, and then there are 80 frost giants as well. As she looks at the enemy line, Cam sees a tall mounted figure come into view, and she recognizes that as Winter. We learn that he has a crown of ice on his head and coldness in his eyes. And on top of that, Reka is by his side. And I'm just like, brother. So he is the Ice King? Who's the fucking Ice King?
Right, because I thought she was the Ice King. I'm so confused.
Right. So Cam is riding next to the leader of the mercenaries who is constantly hitting on her. And actually that sounds creepy, but it's pretty funny.
It's really funny. And I did have a great time with this part.
He single-handedly almost convinced me to read the next book.
Exactly.
It's going to be about him.
I know. I'm still a little on the fence, but I'm still pretty mad about it.
Yeah, same.
But I did enjoy him a lot.
So Falcon gives the signal to charge, and the two armies engage in battle. As they do, Camson uses her weather gifts to summon a storm, and Blazing to amplify her power. She uses this to try to thin the guards around Winter / the Ice King / Rorjack. He thwarts this storm by using his own powers and ends up coming for her directly. Some of the mercenaries and Christy try to defend Cam, but they are all swept to the side. And specifically, Christy is thrown against a tree, and it says that he doesn't get up again. And fam, Christy dies.
He must die. The only explanation is that Christy is gone, and we just never go back to him. Like, for all we know, he's still sitting at the base of that tree.
Just like, I'm getting better.
I'm getting better. Really?
So Winter and Cam engage in sword fight, and somehow Cam is able to do that for a little bit. Okay.
I don't know how she learned that shit.
I know, right? At least briefly, but she's quickly disarmed, and Blazing goes like flying across the field. So she summons all of her power in a storm and channels lightning through her hands as she presses them to Winter's chest before he can actually strike her down. The contact pushes them both apart, and Cam crawls over to Winter's now lifeless form. As she weeps over him, she tells him that she loves him again and again. As she rests her head on his chest, she hears a faint heartbeat and has hope. She kisses him and breathes into his mouth, and he wakes up. When he wakes up, at first he's happy to see her, but then he remembers everything that happened, and he accuses her of betraying him, but she says over and over again that she would never do that and that she loves him. The Ice King starts to take over again. She begs him to resist, but they're interrupted by Reika, who basically shows up and is like, time to die, bitch. I'm like, Reika, come on, man.
Reika,
Read the
go
room.
home.
Go home.
No one invited you. Why are you here?
She tells Cam that she will be the Ice King's queen. Oh my God. And they
Ugh.
start to fight over Winter, which is the grossest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's so gross.
Cam reacts and uses her weather gifts with blazing that she somehow got back in her hand and cuts Reika in half with a beam of lightning, which is kind of metal.
This is really metal, except that I don't understand how she got blazing back.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some consistency, like logistical errors in this book, and that's one of them.
But that's a good way for Reika to go out.
Yeah. So that's great. Reika's gone, but Winter is still armed, and now the leader of the mercenaries is there with one of those ceremonial spears, and he throws it directly at Winter to save Cam. But she puts herself bodily in front of Winter to save him, and so the spear hits her instead. As Winter tries to keep Cam conscious, the thralls are, like, all around them are melting. And it's unclear whether that's because of Cam's sacrifice, because that melted Winter's heart, or because Reika is dead. But also Winter is now, like, no longer mad at Cam because she, like, gave her life for his.
Because, like, she was clearly actually telling the truth the whole time, maybe?
Right. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, this is the success criteria for this book. Like, she has to give her life up for him to believe that she's loyal to him. Like, it's not the baby thing. So, like, the baby is just, like, an also ran, I guess.
Yeah. That's why it made me so mad. Like, she doesn't need to be pregnant. Because even if you wanted to wait for this to be the moment, fine. But, come on.
But then just make this the moment, you know?
Yeah. Also, how does her getting hit with the ice spear not kill the baby?
Okay, that's the other thing. So she gets hit with the ice spear, and I don't know where on her body, but somehow that's not the worst injury. The worst injury is that the ice spear is, like, causing her to freeze over. And so they pull out this spear, and, like, that wound is there, but there's not a concern about that. They're concerned about, like, her freezing. So they put blazing literally next to her because it's a hot fire sword. And that warms her back
lay
up.
it next to her. And she's fine. And she's fine.
Girl, I read this part a couple of times. I'm like, what is happening here?
It was such a cop-out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, yeah. So Winter's holding her. She's thawing, right? And Winter says to her, quote, "I don't have words enough to describe how much I love you." And Cam's a little conscious and tells him to try, which I loved.
I did love that.
And so he does. And he says some, like, love words. And then that's where the book ends. And then we have an epilogue.
Ugh,
So
which I didn't need.
I didn't need this epilogue. So in this epilogue, Christy is nowhere to be seen, which leads me to believe that he's dead.
But
Worse
she doesn't
than
even
that.
mention him.
Exactly. Not a tear to be seen for her companion, Christy.
Nope. Her only friend, who is also basically a servant.
What a cold-hearted bitch. So the other things that happen in this epilogue is that a blindfolded Cam is being led by Winter to the atrium. She's very pregnant, and it's been 6 months since Rorjack's defeat. We learn that the mercenaries were paid, and Winter isn't fighting the Ice Heart anymore, and people are generally happy, except for Christy, who's dead. When Cam opens her eyes, she finds that
everyone forgot about.
When Cam opens her eyes, she finds the atrium has been transformed into a conservatory with all of the plants from her home so that it will remind her of Summerlee in her new home. Not only that, but it's modeled after her mother's sky garden from that one gardening journal from the beginning of the book, I guess? Question mark?
Okay.
We learned that Winter stored some of the ice sculptures that he had. They're just somewhere else now. So he's like sharing his
Why
space.
not?
Great.
Use magic to have them both there combined. That would be much more symbolic and beautiful.
I love that so much. Yeah.
But no,
So-
he just put his sculptures in like a shed.
He's like, fuck my joy. You're more important.
Yeah.
So then her sisters are also there, and they plan to stay until after she gives birth. And when asked if she's happy, Cam tells Winter, quote, "It's perfect. It's everything I could ever have hoped for. You're everything I could have ever hoped for." And that's how the book ends. And fine, whatever, happily ever after. But her sisters are shitty people, and I would not want them around me.
Her sisters don't deserve to be there. Like, cool, I'm great. We have a little tied into a bow. I'm so happy for them, even though I don't think they've had more conversations or actually like each other. But her sisters need to get the fuck out.
Truly, like, they did nothing for her when she was under the thumb of her father, being abused constantly. Even if she wasn't being abused physically, she was being abused mentally and emotionally. And then
Yeah.
she got carted off by her new husband, and they didn't even fucking write to her. They
Nope.
didn't try to get, like, I want a little bit more. Like, it feels so one-sided. Like, it feels like Cam loves the fuck out of them, and they're just like, oh, puppy. You know?
It kind of feels like Farah and her, like, a loyalty to her sisters when, like, they
Yes.
did nothing for her. I mean, Cam's sisters aren't that bad, but they're pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, Cam's sisters are essentially like a bunch of Elaine's.
Exactly. So, like, why are they there? Why are they going to be there for the next 3 months? Why do you want them there for your child? Why do you want them there at all?
Right. Anyway, let's get into some ratings. Liz, why don't you talk to us about the spice level? How'd we do there?
We both gave the spice level a 2. We do get a lot of spice, but it's all the exact same scene. It's all very rushed. It's all very vanilla. There's not a lot of, like, time spent or communication. And really, that it comes down to the communication, I think, primarily. Because, like, we're fine with vanilla and boring, but they have this animal magnetism, but I don't think they like each other. So, like, the chemistry is there, but also not. And so even though we get a lot of it, none of it really hits what we want. Like, I kind of forget it happened at all.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, for as much of it that happens in this book, I wouldn't even say that this is like a particularly smutty book. It's just, I think I'm just not into like that kind of late 90s, early 2000s style of smut.
Exactly, because it feels like closed. It's like door cracked. Like, it might as well have been closed door.
Right, like you just see a sliver of moving bodies or something like that.
Exactly. Like, just blankets are moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
It didn't do it for me.
That takes us into writing style, which we gave a 3. And I think this comes down to a couple of things. I'm going to say 3 things. So the first one is editing. We've mentioned a couple of times that this book would have benefited from like a heavy edit. It's 594 pages long. That's almost 600 pages. Like, easily you could have cut 200 pages from this. Like, we didn't need to see so many of the day-to-day scenes. We also didn't need to see like basically any of the Christie plot line because he was so unceremoniously done away with. Like, I really think that this book would have been a much better product if it was much shorter.
Yes, definitely.
The second thing is the switching back and forth between perspectives was very confusing, at least in the Kindle format, because there wasn't a clean break every single time. And so that was just like not well executed.
Yes, that was the biggest thing for me, I think.
Yeah. And then the third one is just the logistics were kind of sloppy sometimes. Like, we specifically called out at the end, like, how did she get blazing back in her hand? But there were a couple of other times that I'm not even sure if we explicitly called them out, where it was like they'd be sitting and then they were standing, or, you know, somebody was in the room and then they weren't in the room, like that kind of thing. And that's just distracting, frankly.
Yeah, it just takes away from what's happening. It's very confusing.
Yeah. So moving into, so did I say that we gave it a 3?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So moving into quality of storytelling, Liz, how did we rate that?
Did you hear that cat that just screamed at me?
No.
Okay, good. It might be on the mic. She just sat in front of my computer and yelled at me.
Okay.
Sorry. For quality of storytelling, we both also gave this... Stop yelling at me. For quality of storytelling, we also both gave this a 3. Probably pretty clear. There's just a lot of inconsistency in the plot and a lot of really major plot points that just don't make sense. Like the whole Ice Heart, Rorschach, Reka, which is really like the second primary plot, right? Like after their miscommunication love story, didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense. And then there's multiple things like that. Like the whole political landscape of it doesn't make any sense, which are things that matter, right? Like their primary world building plot points to not be explained was just very distracting. Like,
Yeah.
and we could forgive a lot of that if you had given us the smut, but you didn't give us the smut, so therefore I can't forgive it.
Right. Very well said.
Ergo.
Yeah. So I guess that leads us into, do we recommend it? And I'm going to say yes with reservations.
Yeah, I literally like, my brain goes, do you recommend it? Yes?
Question mark? Because like no feels harsh. Like I did read at the top of my lungs in this book, which to me says that it was entertaining, right? And if you're reading, you want to be entertained. So I would say, you know, for some audiences, it is the right book.
Exactly. I certainly didn't dread reading it. I mean, there was one part that we called out that I wanted to yeet my phone across the room.
Right.
But beyond that, I was intrigued. I'm disappointed in the ending, but I'm also not surprised by the ending. So, like, that's also fine, too, I guess.
Yeah, like the ending was like saccharine sweet, right? But I was not really expecting anything else. So here we are.
Exactly. And so the fact that I wasn't like disappointed is even a strong word, because like that's where I thought it was going to end. I just didn't want it.
Right. I am whelmed.
I am whelmed. Neither
Yeah.
under nor over. Just
Correct.
whelmed.
All right, fam. Those are our thoughts on The Winter King by C.L. Wilson. Thank you, as always, for joining us on this journey, especially this one, because I know it was long and probably like some of the episodes blurred together. But if you made it to the end, we really appreciate you. Let us know what you think on the socials. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Goodreads at Spice Readers Pod. And if you like our podcast and you want more content, especially if you want to continue the SJM series, join us on Patreon, where we release those books and you get an extra episode every other week. So that's all for now. Until next time, we'll see ya. Bye.
Bye.